Admiral Vorik Zun stared at the flickering hologram, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. The object before him didn't match anything in the Galactic Empire's registry. No transponder signal, no recognized configuration, and worst of all, it moved in defiance of every known propulsion model. It wasn't cloaked, it wasn't disguised. It simply shouldn't exist. The initial reports were dismissed as human propaganda. Earth, by every measure, was a backwater, a pre-warp species that barely scratched the surface of galactic relevance. They'd been surveyed centuries ago, labeled non-threatening, and discarded. But here it was, a vessel of unknown origin appearing in Imperial space, silent, precise, and haunting. The crew aboard the remote scout station had been neutralized. No casualties, no wreckage, just missing. The Empire's intelligence network speculated it was a rogue AI, perhaps a defector from a fringe species. No one considered the possibility that it was human. Humans didn't build ships like that. Humans were resource-poor, chaotic, emotional. Their fleets were bulky, their weapons primitive, their strategies obvious. That was the consensus, and consensus in the Empire was law. A low-ranking analyst dared to propose the vessel could be Earth-based. He was removed from duty and placed under surveillance. The Empire didn't tolerate absurdities. Instead, a light interceptor squadron was dispatched, a procedural formality. 12 vessels with enough firepower to level a moon, sent to investigate what was presumed to be an overglorified atmospheric drone. They expected surrender. They received silence. The human vessel responded to no hails, no warnings, not even a gesture of acknowledgement. It floated, seemingly inert, until it wasn't. Within 17 seconds of the interceptor's breaching visual range, 3 disappeared from sensors. No explosions, no energy surges, just absence. The remaining ships initiated evasive maneuvers, deploying countermeasures designed to jam even the most sophisticated stealth technology. Useless. The alien ship, if that's what it was, didn't cloak. It vanished. Its reappearance was worse. It slid into formation among the interceptors like a ghost pretending to be real. A black hull that shimmered like oil on water, surface patterns shifting, mutating, pulsing. Admiral Zun's advisors attempted to justify what they were seeing. Holographic deception, gravitic interference, optical illusions, anything but human. But Zun had seen enough battle logs to know when something was moving with intention. This wasn't a test. It wasn't an accident. It was a demonstration. The intercepted comms from the last remaining interceptor crackled with one final message. This ship is watching, and it learns. The words were in Galactic Standard, but the accent was unmistakably human. Not just any human, military-trained, disciplined. Not the frantic babble the Empire remembered from Earth's first contact. This was cold, measured, deliberate. A tone that didn't ask for respect. It assumed it. Back at Imperial High Command, simulations ran around the clock trying to deconstruct the event. Every theory returned null. No trajectory calculations. No identifiable weapon signatures. No known origin. Then came a second transmission. Clear. Compressed. Human. Observation phase complete. Initiating response protocol. And just like that, it vanished again. Not a jump. Not a retreat. A disappearance. As if it was never there. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire wasn't laughing. The Imperial response was immediate and disproportionate. A destroyer wing, outfitted with advanced AI targeting systems and a Class 7 signal suppression net, was dispatched to Quadrant V38 where the anomaly last appeared. They expected retaliation. Instead, they were met with nothing. Empty space. Silence. No trace of the vessel. No wake in subspace. Not even radiation residue. The technicians insisted their instruments were functioning. The data read 0 across every axis, as if the ship had passed through unreality itself. 90 minutes later, it returned. Not in the same sector, not even in the same star system, but inside the formation of the Imperial fleet sent to hunt it. It arrived without warning, between 2 cruisers whose proximity alarms never triggered. Surveillance drones caught only fragments, a shimmer in the void, a sharp distortion like a mirage snapping into focus. Then came the chaos. Power systems collapsed. Shields dropped to zero. Control interfaces froze mid-command. 3 ships lost helm control. 1 turned its guns on the others. No shots were fired by the anomaly, and yet 5 Imperial vessels were drifting, dead and helpless, within 60 seconds of its arrival. Fleet Command issued an emergency scramble. All weapons were to lock and fire on any unknown object. They fired everything: plasma bursts, ion spears, thermonuclear flares. The space where the ship had hovered was engulfed in light and fury. But when the glare faded, the object remained, unscathed, silent, watching. A transmission followed, brief and emotionless. Your weapons are ineffective. Your assumptions are incorrect. Panic began to fracture the chain of command. Junior officers demanded evacuation. Veterans fell into stunned silence. This wasn't a battle. It was a study. The anomaly didn't attack. It dismantled, with surgical precision and unsettling patience. The fleet's communications officer, mid-transmission, screamed before being cut off. The last image from his feed was a shifting panel in the human ship's hull opening like an iris, revealing nothing but a void within. Back on the bridge of the surviving command ship, Admiral Zune reviewed the sensor logs again and again. There was no pattern to the disruption. It didn't use conventional jamming. It didn't hack systems in the known sense. Instead, it simply refused to be measured. Physics didn't behave properly around it. Mass estimates fluctuated. Heat signatures contradicted visual input. Even timestamps in the logs showed discrepancies, as if the ship existed at a slant to real space. Then came another message. This is not a threat. It is a mirror. What you see is what you refused to believe. The implications were unacceptable. If humans had built this, then Earth was not a primitive world they were hiding. If this was a prototype, then what else had they built? How many more like this existed? How long had they watched in silence while the Empire ruled the stars under the illusion of dominance? The Admiral issued one last command before ordering a retreat. Transmit every recording to Imperial High Command under Priority Alpha. Include this line in the briefing. We have encountered something that should not be, and it wears a human voice. Dr. Nia Rao had waited 26 years for this moment. Not for revenge. Not for war. For revelation. Earth had never been as backward as the Empire believed. It had simply played its part, staying quiet, staying small, while its best minds worked underground. After that first disastrous contact, humanity learned the truth. The Galactic Order wasn't built on enlightenment or cooperation. It was built on hierarchy, fear, and control. Civilizations that refused to kneel were isolated. Those who resisted were extinguished. So Earth disappeared. Not physically, but diplomatically, technologically, deliberately. Satellites were disabled. Outposts self-sabotaged. Every sign of advancement was scrubbed. They let the Empire believe they were harmless. Meanwhile, the Phantom Initiative began. Hidden beneath ice sheets, deep ocean trenches, and off-world colonies disguised as mining stations, Earth's brightest engineers and rogue physicists built in silence. Every scrap of alien tech smuggled from black markets or salvaged from wreckage became a lesson. Every anomaly in hyperspace became an opportunity. They didn't try to mimic the Empire. They sought to surpass it. And in time, they did. Project HARPIA, Humanoid Adaptive Recon Platform, Interdimensional Architecture. A ship not made to follow galactic conventions, but to defy them. Built with self-evolving nanostructure skin, equipped with an AI consciousness modeled on aggregated battlefield data, and powered by a quantum-dislocated core that operated milliseconds ahead of real time. It didn't predict enemy movements, it experienced them before they occurred. Dr. Rao watched the first flight from a command chamber shielded 6 kilometers beneath the surface of Europa's southern pole. The ship didn't launch. It phased. One moment it was sitting on the platform, the next it simply wasn't. Not cloaked, not warped, gone. And then it returned. With logs, with maps, with intercepted comms from over 700 Imperial outposts. Commander Ilara Nox was selected not for rank, but for mind. She was unshakable, disciplined, and utterly pragmatic. She didn't crave glory. She understood purpose. She merged with HARPIA through neural sync, forming a link that blurred the line between machine and operator. She became its will, and it became her voice. Nox was not sent to attack. She was sent to observe, to see how the Empire would react when the veil of control was lifted, when their illusions of superiority cracked. And they cracked exactly as predicted. No diplomatic overture, no curiosity, just escalation, fear. And fear was the goal. Dr. Rao documented everything. Every response time, every deployment pattern, every failure in Imperial coordination. The ship's real weapon wasn't its speed or stealth. It was data, knowledge. HARPIA was harvesting vulnerabilities across the Empire's core systems without launching a single missile. That was the human solution. Not brute force, not conquest. Leverage. Quiet, undeniable leverage. Rao smiled as the latest burst transmission arrived from Nox. They believe we have a fleet. Recommend we don't correct them. Earth didn't need numbers. Earth needed precision. The Empire had spread wide for millennia. Now it would learn what happens when a forgotten species no longer asks for a seat at the table, but flips it instead. The Empire's response was swift, chaotic, and catastrophic. A fleet of 50 capital ships was assembled within hours, all bearing the Empire's most advanced weaponry and shield technology. It was their best chance to neutralize the human anomaly before it spread beyond their control. The Admiralty had learned one crucial truth from their earlier failures. The human ship didn't need to fight. It simply needed to exist. And in the vastness of space, its presence was enough to send the Empire's most formidable forces into a frenzy. Nox's ship, HARPIA, had already moved into position. It didn't advance, didn't retreat, simply waited. To the Empire, it must have seemed like a mistake, a trick, an error in their calculations. A small human vessel, barely half the size of any warship in their arsenal, alone and unarmed, against a fleet of imposing battleships and destroyers. But that was the danger. The human ship didn't need weapons. It didn't need overwhelming firepower. It just needed to be present, to show the Empire that its arrogance had blinded it to the true nature of the universe. To force the galaxy's greatest power to acknowledge that its superiority was a lie. For a moment, all was quiet. The fleet's command ships issued orders, but the distance between them and their target seemed to stretch unnaturally. Seconds turned into minutes, and still no one moved. Not a single shot was fired. Then the silence broke. The first capital ship fired on HARPIA, unleashing the full force of its arsenal: plasma beams, railguns, and ion bombs designed to level entire cities. The moment the weapons reached their target, they evaporated into nothing. The space around the human ship warped in response, its field absorbing and redirecting the entire barrage without a single mark on its hull. Imperial commanders didn't understand. How could this happen? Where was the logic? How could something so small, so seemingly insignificant, defy every law of physics? There were no answers, only chaos. The weapons they relied on didn't work, and their countermeasures fell silent. Systems meant to block communications failed. Their targeting systems went blind. The truth slowly sank in. The human ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a test, a message. It was humanity's proof that they were not some weak, forgotten species, but a force that could change the very nature of galactic power. Then, just as quickly as the battle had begun, it stopped. Nox's voice crackled through the fleet's comm channels, cold and calm. "You're out of time. The game has changed. This galaxy will not belong to those who think they can control it." The Imperial fleet, crippled and confused, began to retreat. Their ships didn't explode. They didn't shatter under fire. They simply stopped. Systems ceased to function. No signals, no orders, just silence. The remaining commanders were left to watch in horror as their fleet scattered like leaves before a storm. They were no longer in control. They were never in control. Back on Earth, Dr. Rao stood before a hologram of Nox's last transmission. The human ship had done its work. It had dismantled the Empire not with weapons, but with the one thing that they couldn't understand: the will to adapt. It wasn't about overwhelming force or advanced technology, it was about survival. The Empire had underestimated humanity for too long. Now, they would know what it meant to face a species that had no fear of the future, no fear of the unknown. As Nox's ship slipped back into the dark folds of space, the final message transmitted to the Empire was simple, but it would echo through their minds forever. We will not kneel. We never did.